This week on Mysteriously Disappeared, we look at the mysterious disappearance of Lord Lucan. Lucan was a British aristocrat wanted in connection with the murder of his 29-year-old nanny, Sandra Rivett. Let's take a look at the facts of the case. In 1974, Britain and much later the rest of the world would be captivated by the brutal murder of a 29-year-old nanny named Sandra Rivett and the rapid disappearance of the main suspect, an aristocrat named Richard John Bingham, better known as Lord Lucan. In 1963, 11 years before the murder, Veronica Duncan and Lord Lucan met at a golfing event. By the end of the year, they were married. Veronica and Lucan's relationship started out happily. Veronica had said she was looking for a god, and he was a dream figure. Of course, it happened that Lucan was, according to the New York Times, a dashing British aristocrat and army officer, known for his prowess at backgammon and bridge, and his fondness for vodka martinis, powerboats, and Aston Martin cars, who was even a candidate for the role of James Bond. Lucan first worked as a banker, but after he won 10 times his salary in an evening of baccarat, he became a professional gambler. Lucan was famous for never showing emotion when playing other games, whether he won or lost. Lord Lucan enjoyed nothing more than hanging out with his gambling associates at the exclusive Claremont Club, but money was a problem. His luck didn't last, and by the time of the murder, he owed about $60,000. Veronica also resented the evening routine and suffered from depression. She told ITV that he beat her with a cane to get the mad ideas out of her head. But they have measured blows, she said, and spiced up their love life. By 1972, Lucan had moved out, but he was worried he could lose access to his children. Things escalated in the weeks before the murder when Veronica won a court battle for custody. The battle had been bitter, and according to the Times, his efforts to prove she was insane had pushed him further into debt. At 9 p.m. on November 7, 1974, Sandra Rivett descended into the dark basement of an apartment in Belgravia, London. She never walked out. At about 10 p.m., a different bleeding woman burst into a nearby pub called the Plumber's Arms, screaming for help. Help me, she said. I've just escaped from a murderer. He's in my house. He's murdered the nanny." The bleeding woman was Veronica Lucan. She had gone into the basement looking for Rivett, wondering why her cup of tea was taking so long. Veronica maintained Lucan had meant to kill her and accidentally killed Rivett in the dark. Down in the basement, she too had been bludgeoned over the head with a lead pipe, but she escaped by grabbing his testicles and squeezing. The man she called the murderer was her estranged husband, but a lot was still unclear. Rivett was found in a U.S. mailing bag in the home's dark basement. Still contested was who did it and why. On the night Rivett was murdered, Lucan never showed up to a date he'd arranged with a woman named Andrina Coluquan. A few hours before he disappeared, Lucan maintained someone else had tried to kill his wife. So he told his friend, Susan Maxwell Scott, after driving 42 miles to her house in Sussex in a borrowed Ford Corsair. He said his wife had accused him of hiring a killer, and he was going to lie doggo. At the house, he called his mother and wrote several letters. Then, in the early hours of the following morning, Lucan disappeared. He was 39 years old. The last person to ever see him alive was Maxwell Scott. She said she didn't call the police because she didn't know he was a wanted man. 3 days later, on November 10th, the car he borrowed was found in New Haven, East Sussex, on the southern English coast. Inside the car, there were bloodstains and a piece of lead pipe in the trunk. A nationwide manhunt began, but the investigation was impeded, according to the Independent, by Lucan's aristocratic pals doing their best not to help. They were described as patronizing and condescending. Even though Lucan wasn't found, an official inquest in 1975 confirmed he had killed Rivett. The New York Times headline read, "A stylish British lord is named as a killer." There have been many ideas on what could have happened to Lord Lucan. Let's take a look at some of the most prevalent theories. Number 1. Suicide. In 1977, 4 years after his disappearance, Veronica wrote a letter telling him to give himself up. She later stated she thought he'd killed himself by stuffing rocks into his pants after he realized his mistake. Veronica said she believed he threw himself off a ferry, purposefully aiming to go under the propeller so that no one would find his body. Number 2, hiding in Africa. Another thought was that he disappeared into Africa, or more specifically, Kenya. Shirley Roby, who worked as a secretary for the Clement Club owner John Aspinall 5 years after Lucan's disappearance, claimed she had overheard conversations between her employer and another club regular, James Goldsmith, which implied that Lucan was still alive and that Aspinall remained in touch with him. Soon after, according to Roby, she was asked to make arrangements for Lucan's eldest children to travel to Gabon and from there to Kenya. Roby's assumption, at least in hindsight, was that the intention was for his children to be seen by their father, with or without their knowledge. In 2012, his brother, Hugh Bingham, told media outlets that he was sure Lucan made it to South Africa. They hadn't spoken for years, even before his disappearance. Number 3, fed to a tiger. When Lady Osborne met with the police, she reportedly told them, "The last I heard of him, he was being fed to the tigers at my son's zoo." When her son-in-law, John Aspinall, who owned a private zoo, was questioned, he said he served his tigers better quality meat. Number 4, help from aristocratic friends. Again in 2017, a detective who had run the case at one point told the Sun that he had no doubt Lucan got away, helped by his friends who he called the Sloane Square Mafia. Number 5, he's alive, hiding, but very sick. Stephen Raphael, one of Lucan's friends, reportedly said he met with Lucan at Aspinall's zoo to discuss what they should do next. The first reported sighting of Lucan was in January 1975, when he was reportedly spotted in Melbourne, Australia. 5 months later, he was apparently seen in Cherbourg and St. Malo, both in France. After that, sightings were reported in Mozambique and then Bulawayo, and there were even claims that he lived in India as a hippie called Jungle Berry. In 1978, Barbados police were asked by Scotland Yard to investigate reports that a British resident was sending money to Lord Lucan in South America. In 2007, the search switched to New Zealand after claims he had been living in a car. In January 2020, Rivett's son Neil claimed he discovered Lucan living in an unnamed city in Australia, living as a Buddhist. The man believed to be Lucan in his mid-80s was seriously ill, awaiting major surgery and virtually housebound in a large shared detached house in the suburbs. Witnesses confirmed that an elderly English man who looks like Lucan lives in that house. Scotland Yard says it looked into the claim. In 1999, Lucan was declared legally dead, and in 2016, an official death certificate was released so his son could take the title. A year later, in 2017, Veronica was found dead in the same house her estranged husband lived in when he disappeared. Veronica was found to have killed herself with a cocktail of drink and drugs after wrongly self-diagnosing with Parkinson's disease. After her death, letters were found beneath the floorboards. In them, she lamented how she was portrayed in the media and claimed Lucan was unstable. No one knows for sure what happened to Lucan, but by 2017, he had been spotted more than 70 times, none of the sightings proving to be true. To this day, the public doesn't know what happened in the mysterious disappearance of Lord Lucan. He seems to have simply vanished. What do you think happened to Lord Lucan? Please leave your theories in the comments. Also, let us know who you'd like us to investigate. Finally, don't forget to like the video, click the notification button, and subscribe so that you never miss an update about those who mysteriously disappeared.